Now we will look to a different type of discrimination. As I said, the wage discrimination is just one form of the discrimination. Another type of discrimination, which is also one of the most mentioned types of it, is occupational segregation. Basically, having certain occupations that are open to certain groups and other occupations that are open to other groups. For example, women concentrated in occupations like nursing and men concentrated occupations like construction, for example. In this case, actually, both are kind of, you might say, both are kind of discriminated because a man can be a nurse, but he is not accepted to the job because of his gender. He's also discriminated. But you might also say that, I mean, in some cases, some groups are more concentrated, highly concentrated in high wage sectors and others in low wage sectors. In that case, I mean, a certain group is, as a whole, if you look, there's an extra degree of discrimination faced by that group. And gender discrimination might be one case, another one. I mean, you can look for any group this type of discrimination. Well, different age groups, different again, different religions, different cultures, different hometowns, for example. In all cases, I mean, when you can separate total workers to any particular two groups, you can test whether there's an occupational segregation between those groups. The main index that is used for this test is called Duncan Index of Dissimilarity. And this index can use actually as many occupations as you would like to. And actually, in order to make a proper calculation, proper, let's say, evaluation of the number, it is necessary to know the exact number of sectors involved in the measurements process. And what is done is basically this. For example, if you have two sectors, you subtract percentage of women in sector 1 and percentage of men in sector 1, and if the number is negative, you take positive of that number. You do same for the sector 2, and you then divide the sum to 2. That's the 2-sector case. If there is a 3-sector case, then you do the same thing for 3 sectors, and then you divide again the total number into 3. But when you have more sectors, I mean, for example, let's say this is agricultural sector and this is industrial sector, and you have also service sector, let's say. In whole service sector, maybe the men and women might be working in the same percentages, but when you separate service sector to two different sectors or more sectors, you may find out that maybe in the healthcare sector there are more men, and maybe in the restaurant sector there are more women, basically. So the more sectors you have, of course, the idea is at least stay the same. Maybe it might even increase. It will stay the same if occupations, I mean, male-female percentages of service sector in all sub-branches of this sector is exactly equal to the well, percentage, the difference of percentages of the initial sector itself, basically. I mean, the the service sector itself. So the numbers should not be greater than that. At least on average, they should not be greater than that. So this is the case. I mean, if 80% of men are working in production sector and 40% of women work in the production sector, and let's say you have service sector and you don't have an agricultural sector. Let's say this is a city, for example. In that case, you subtract 0.4 from 0.8 from 0.4 and find 0.4. In that case, that's 0.4. And you subtract 0.2, which is percentage of men working in service sector, and minus 0.6 is that, which is percentage of women working in service sector, which is minus 0.4, but you make it positive, so it will become positive 0.4. When you add both numbers, it is 0.8. When you divide it to 2, it is 0.4. Here, of course, but because you have two sectors, the numbers are same, but if you increase the number of sectors to 3, the numbers won't be same anymore. If both men and women, the working men and women are equally distributed between the sectors, which means 0.70% of both male and female workforce work in production, while 30% of both workforce work in the agriculture or service sector. In that case, the ID will be 0, because 0.7 minus 0.7 is 0, 0.3 minus 0.3 is also 0. When you sum them, you also get 0. When all men, I mean, this is the one extreme case. The other extreme case is when all men work in service, women work in service sector, and all men work in the production sector. In that case, 1 minus 0 plus 0 minus 1 in, of course, absolute value of this, divided by 2 will be 1. So the number is between 1 and 0, always 1 and 0, since you divide it all to the number of sectors. Well, DID gets larger when you have more segregation. DID is smaller when you have a smaller segregation. And again, if you have more sectors, typically, I mean, DID is expected to increase more compared with when you have, the case when you have few sectors. Okay, so these are the numbers. The largest occupational segregation, interestingly, is in Sweden. Otherwise, I mean, it is, or Czech Republic also has a high value. Hungary has high value. Austria has high value. Netherlands has a high value. Switzerland has a high value. Usually countries with more social duties are where social duties are attributed to the state. You see, interestingly, a higher DID number. When you look to Australia, well, Germany is kind of in between. Actually, United States and Australia have small EID values. And Italy, Germany, well, interesting, Norway and New Zealand, I mean, again, well, those are the countries, I mean, especially Norway is a country with a lot of, you have social, the state with social functions, I mean, you have state which is intervening to the economic system and supporting the people. So actually, these numbers are interesting. I mean, you don't clearly see what are the factors that are actually, what are the specific characteristics of the countries with relatively large DID, and what are the characteristics of the countries with relatively low DID. It's not clear. For example, United Kingdom also has a high DID. although it is more like United States in terms of, states' social role is more limited there. Anyway, this is the idea. Now, of course, there are some other methods and ways, but for now, I want to pass to the models that are explaining the discrimination. The most famous model is the personal prejudice model. And then you have statistical discrimination model, which is kind of a secondary model, occupational crowded model, and one of the models are relatively more small, less important models. Personal prejudice model basically based on the idea that when someone hires a member of a certain group, certain people, when they are hiring or working with or getting goods and services produced by members of certain groups, they feel disutility. So it might be, let me reverse things a little bit. Let's say whenever I hire a man to run my airplane, I feel disutility, and that disutility is not related to to how well the man is doing his job. It is more related to my personal, the fact that I don't like man. Basically, man doing that job. When man do that job, I feel a dislike. This basically. Similarly, in some cases, workers might feel a dislike when basically certain members of certain groups do that job with them, or customers. In one case, actually, this can be a case. That was in the news. When the journalist was going into has written a journalist, famous journalist in Turkey has written this. When he was going into a plane with his friend, actually, his friend saw that the captain of the plane, the pilot of the plane, was the woman, and he was panicked. He said, woman might not be able to fly the plane, maybe. And that prejudice itself might be, a personal prejudice, because in that it doesn't relate to the actual productivity of that woman, but the personal thing happening in the mind of that person. But whenever you have that discrimination, in that case, basically, for example, if I am basically feeling disutility when I hire a woman, for example, in that case, when I hire a woman, that woman produce something and give me profit, which turns to a utility. But normally I should pay that woman a wage equal to the value of the product she produces. But because I feel disutility, while I got this profit, I also got a disutility. So I earn the profit and I also get disutility. For example, if that disutility is for me $5 and I earn a profit which is $15, it's as if I have actually earned $10, not $15, because this $5 of disutility from my mind is part of my loss. As a result, when I hire a woman, for me, it's as if the productivity of her is actually $10, not $15, although her actual productivity is $15. From my perspective, my subjective perspective, it is that way. And in that case, I might pay to that woman W1 minus D, which means I will pay, you might also turn it the other way around and say I will pay the male workers 1 plus W1 plus D, basically.